Hi, I'm Charlie Starr. The video you are about to watch is part of my free course, How to Read a Birth Chart. And now, back to this video. Hello, my lovelies, welcome back. In today's video, we're gonna be getting through a lot of stuff. I'm super excited because we're finally getting into the house systems and the houses and what each of the houses mean. So that's kind of like our final piece before we start getting into interpreting things as a whole. And this is where things start to get controversial because different astrologers use different house systems. So in this video, I'm going to cover different house systems. See, I have a little list here. So we are going to first cover the collective versus the personal houses. That divides the wheel up into two. And then we're gonna also talk about the different house systems that are popular, how they're divided and why they're divided that way. We're definitely not gonna cover all of the house systems because there's a lot of different ones, but we're gonna cover some of the more popular ones. And then we're going to learn about the angular, succedent, and cadent houses and what those mean. And then finally, we're going to be talking about the Trinity houses, and that's how we're going to be learning each of the houses, which basically subdivides the wheel up into sections of 3. So then from there, we'll have 4 videos, and each video will cover 3 of the houses. Okay, so just dividing up the zodiac wheel into collective versus personal houses, that's essentially just dividing up the first 6 houses from the last 6 houses. Another way that you can divide this is below the ascendant and the descendant axis, so it's essentially the night sky versus the day sky. This is a really, really rough outline of categorizing the houses to where you have the night sky or the personal houses more dealing with personal issues, and then the collective houses, the top half, the day sky in the chart, dealing with integration into society and group ideas. This is, again, it's very, very rough division, but I think one good way of thinking about it is that the houses that are above the horizon are more visible to the outside world. They're more how we move through society and through our lives in an externalized way. And the first 6 houses more have to do with our origin and our internalized things. In Hellenistic astrology, the personal houses or the night sky, the first 6 houses, are ruled by the moon, roughly ruled by, it's kind of like the moon is the primary luminary of those houses, and then the sun is the primary luminary of the day sky, right? So that's kind of how you can think about it. You've already learned about the symbolism of the moon and the sun, the subconscious versus the conscious, the sun being the projecting energy, the moon being the receptive energy, and other different categorizations. So it's just kind of a loose way to divide the wheel into 2 different areas of life. As we'll see when we get into each of the individual houses, we'll see that the reality is a little bit more complex than that. But as a loose generalization, that division can be made. Angular, succedent, and cadent houses. What does that mean? Well, we're dividing up the zodiac wheel, which we've learned about in previous modules, as a whole, or as a sort of collective unit that's up in the sky. So the birth chart takes all of that outer expression and makes it the personal inner landscape. The angular, succedent, and cadent houses, we are taking the traditional modalities and we're personalizing them. That's the best way that I can think of this, because you have the angular houses being likened to the cardinal houses because these are the houses that generally include or start at the ascendant, the descendant, the IC, and the midheaven, the natal cross. So these are points of action where you are moving from these major pivotal sensitive points into a particular direction. Then from there, you have the succedent houses, which are like the personal fixed houses. And in these houses, you are developing, embellishing, and making progress on whatever has been started in the angular house. Then finally in the cadent house, you have the things being dismantled, the things being deconstructed, and your life being reoriented in a new direction. So you can see how this kind of falls into the divisions of cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Essentially what this is describing is your own personal seasonal pattern. If you have, for example, like mutable signs on your angular houses, then you're probably going to feel like you're constantly deconstructing and reorienting your life, that kind of thing, because the modalities apply to the signs, but the houses, which are either angular, succedent, or cadent, is kind of applying that same energy to your own personal life. So this is your own personal seasonal pattern. Okay, so here we have the wheel pulled up in whole sign housing, which is the same system that I've shown you guys throughout this course. So what do I mean by whole sign housing? This might be more clear when I start showing you other house divisions, but basically the border of the house is also the border of the sign. So that's what whole sign house system is. It's dividing up the houses, which are these little numbers right here. So it's saying the first house, the second house, the third house, and all of Aquarius is the first house, all of Pisces is the second house, all of Aries is the third house, and so on and so forth. Now, this system is gaining in popularity. It is the original house system. However, we didn't really know until recently that this was the house system that the Hellenistic astrologers were using. And so we had come up with different house systems, which I'll show you in a minute. But basically the houses can be divided up using the ecliptic, which would include equal house system and quadric house systems, including Porphyr system, which I'll show you. You can also divide up the house systems based on time, and that would include Placidus and Koch. And then there's other ways that you can divide up the house systems based on space, which we're not really going to get into. But I will show you the equal house system, the Porphyr house system, which is a quadrant system. I'll show you Placidus and I'll show you Koch. Okay, so here we have Placidus. I'm showing you guys Placidus first because this house division is the #1 default house system that you will see on different apps, on different websites. When you put in your information, a lot of the time this is the default. So this is why I'm showing it to you guys first, but I'm going to read to you guys from the 12 Houses by Howard Sesportas, a little description of the time system, a little explanation of why it's divided up this way. So in these systems, time systems, the house cusps are found by equally dividing the time it takes for a chosen point, such as the ascendant or midheaven, to travel an arc of the celestial sphere. The best known time systems are the Placidus house systems, the Koch or birthplace house systems, and the topocentric house system. So yes, that is why these houses are divided up this way. As you can see, this really changes the houses, you guys. So you do have, I've noticed that the first house starts on the ascendant still, and the 10th house starts at the MC. That is pretty common. It looks like the true is also for the descendant and for the IC. So you can see that. So that's pretty common that the first house starts on the ascended degree. That's obviously different than whole sign house system, because with whole sign house system, you could have your ascendant degree at 29 degrees of Aquarius down here, but the entire sign of Aquarius is your first house. In this house system, that's not going to be the case. And in a lot of house systems, that's not the case. A lot of them start your first house on the ascendant. So that's always going to be the top. And in this case, the first house is all of this space right here. So it's still Aquarius is the first house, even though the first house covers some of Aquarius, all of Pisces, and some of Aries. The way that you read these different house divisions when they're divided up this way is that whatever sign is on the cusp is the sign that rules that house. I hope that makes sense. So all of this first house is considered to be ruled by Aquarius. And then all of this, I didn't do that right, all of your second house is going to be ruled by Aries. I didn't get all of it, but you guys can see that. So even though some of it is actually Taurus. So this, what's interesting is this puts this person's north node in Taurus, but in their second house. Okay, so you can kind of see that. So then this fourth house, the beginning of this fourth house cusp is obviously Gemini, but you can see that this is actually the IC, which we learned about before. So here's the IC. And then up here is the MC. So that's the beginning, the 10th house. So that's how this house system works. So your midheaven, your ascendant, and your descendant over here are all going to mark house cusps, which basically is just another way of saying that that's when the house starts. That's what these lines are. I'm going to just like highlight those for you. So these lines here, these are the cusps. These are the divisions of the different houses. Okay, and this one's the descendant that I'm highlighting right now. And so then according to Placidus, this person's 7th house is huge, but like their 4th house is still really small. And their 10th house is really small. All of that, right? So that's Placidus. It's dividing everything up quite differently than whole sign house system, and it's based on timing, and it's beginning the houses on the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, and the IC, and then using timing to divide up the houses in between those 4 quadrants. So this method was devised by a Spanish monk, Placidus de Titus, in the early 17th century. Mathematically is one of the most difficult house systems to calculate. Put very simply, the 11th and 12th house cups are felt by trisecting the time it takes any degree of the ecliptic to travel from the ascendant to the midheaven, semi-diurnal arc. Likewise, the time it takes any degree to travel from the IC to the ascendant is trisected to give the 2nd and 3rd house cups. At first, the system was opposed by astrologers because of its time-based factor. However, Jeffrey Dean points out that it is no more based on time than any other system because all systems can be described in terms of the division of time. The system eventually achieved great popularity, helped by the fact that the 19th century astrologer Raphael published an almanac including the Placidian table of houses. The main problem with this system arises from the fact that in latitudes greater than 66.5 degrees, many degrees never touch the horizon at all. In other words, it is in these high latitudes, certain degrees of the ecliptic can never become the ascendant. The whole system is based on the time it takes from a degree to move to the ascendant to midheaven. If a certain degree never arises, no time intervals can be determined, and therefore this degree cannot form the cusp of any house. Okay, so the problem is also true for the Koch system, which I will show you. Honestly, I think these are a little bit confusing. They're a little bit hard to follow. Let me show you Koch. Okay, so here is Koch. It's also time-based, just like Placidus. And this is another popular house system. As you can see, the first house starts on the ascendant, just like in Placidus. We also have the 10th house starting on the midheaven and the 7th house starting at the IC at the descendant, and then the 4th house starting at the IC. So those things we have in common, but then they've divided it's also a time-based system, but you can see that the first house is a little bit smaller. The houses are a little bit more equally divided. Let's take a look at why. So Howard Sasportas writes, the first tables for this method was published in 1971. Its author, Dr. Walter Koch, proclaimed that at last a solution to the problem of house division had been found. The system is based on time dynamic, evaluating the positions of all points on the ecliptic in respect to the ascendant and the birthplace. The trigonometry involved is complex, using the arc of oblique ascension, small circles which mark the path of a planet during its 24 hours of motion at the place of birth. Although Koch claims that the system is the only method which calculates the chart for the exact birthplace, Donna Lorenz contends that most Koch's method are no more birthplace-centered than any other method. Like the Placian method, it fails in the polar regions. So same problem that you have with Placidus is that it doesn't actually work on every place on Earth. I also find this one to be complicated, but it is also a popular way of dividing up the houses. All right, so let us move on to our ecliptic house systems. Okay, so this house system called the equal house system is relatively simple. It's the same as the whole house system, except for the fact that it begins the house on the ascendant cusp. But after that, everything is equal. So we have the first house starting on the ascendant as opposed to at the beginning of the sign, like in whole sign. And so then the same over here, you have the 7th house starting on the descendant, and then everything else is divided up into 30 degrees. That's why it's called equal house system, because you still have 30 degrees per each sign. Okay, so here we have Porphyry, which is also ecliptic based. So it's ecliptic based because, just like equal house system, it uses the natal cross to divide the houses. However, unlike equal house system, which kind of ignores, well, not ignores, but it doesn't use the midheaven as a point to divide the houses, or the IC as a point to divide the houses, Porphyry does. So this is a quadrant house system. So essentially what we have with this house system is we have, first of all, they've divided up the natal cross. You have the ascendant and the descendant axis, and then you have the midheaven and the IC. So then they've divided up these quadrants into equal pieces. So the first through the third, the first 3 houses are going to be an equal division between the ascendant and the IC. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th houses are going to be an equal division between the IC and the descendant. Then these houses are going to be, sorry, it's like circling outside of it, but these houses are going to be equal division between the descendant and the midheaven. And then the last 3 houses are going to be an equal division between the midheaven and the ascendant. If I was going to use a system other than whole sign, that's what I would use. To me, that makes the most sense of all the house systems that are not whole sign house systems. You guys get to pick what house system you use, but moving forward from here, you can kind of play with different house systems, but the most important takeaway, I think, is that you guys know that there are these different house systems, and you can use which house system that makes sense to you and that you prefer, and see if it works. And if you don't like the one that you're using, switch to a different one. But excuse me, this is the #1 thing that my friends get confused about when I'm saying this is in your house, is in your 3rd house or your 4th house, or what. Then they get frustrated because they look at different websites and they're like, oh, but it said that it was in my 5th house or my 4th house or my 2nd house or whatever, right? So this is the number one source of confusion. But when you start to control what house system you're using, when you get onto these websites, it might have Placidus as the default, but you can go to the house system tab and you can select the house system that is your preference. Okay, so once you learn to do that, then things can become much more clear to you because you're using the same house system consistently. Now we're going to be dividing up the houses into groups of 3. The 3 groups that we're going to be dividing it up into are all going to, at least in the whole house system, share the same element. So for your 3 groups, every group is either going to be all water, all earth, all air, or all fire. The houses also have associations that are clearly grouped together. So we have the 1st, the 5th, and the 9th houses are called, and this is taken from Howard Sasporta's book, The Trinity of Spirit. So we're going to have a video specifically about those houses. Then we have the Trinity of Matter, which is the 2nd, the 6th, and the 10th, which I often call the career houses. Then we have the Trinity of Relationships, which is the 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th houses. And then finally, we have the Trinity of Soul, which is going to be the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th houses. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. And let's get right into the houses. I'll look forward to talking to you tomorrow. See you then. Bye.